Tell me this wasn't on purpose. She knew exactly what she was doing. You could feel the energy shift the moment the topic came up. The hosts froze. The crew literally stopped moving. It's the kind of silence that screams louder than any headline. We are watching the final desperate days of a brand that was supposed to change the world, and instead, it's imploding in front of our eyes. They screamed for privacy, then turned their entire existence into a reality show. They preached authenticity, then dodged the simplest questions that every other public figure answers without blinking. But here's the wildest part. The one thing they absolutely refuse to talk about is the one thing that actually matters: their own children. Most parents can't shut up about their kids, right? But with Harry and Meghan, it's total silence when it matters most. The glossy photos, the carefully staged moments, the billion-dollar reputation, it's all starting to crack. And what's underneath might be the biggest royal mess we've seen in decades. Buckle up, because this story gets darker than you think. Let's dive straight into the moment the world realized it was over. Their wedding anniversary rolled around recently, and everyone was expecting the usual circus. You know the drill by now. We usually get the glossy Instagram photos, maybe a spontaneous black and white shot of them laughing in a garden, some kind of "we're still relevant, look at us" post. That has been their modus operandi for years. Every milestone, every achievement, every breath they take usually gets broadcast to the world with perfect lighting and a heartfelt caption written by a PR team. They have made a whole career out of monetization of these moments, but this time, crickets. Absolutely nothing. No posts from them, no gushing messages from the royal family, not even their supposed Hollywood inner circle bothered to show up with a congratulatory comment. And listen, these are people who usually can't resist a photo op. Remember when they used to drop those perfectly timed announcements to overshadow royal events? When they would coordinate their PR moments down to the minute to steal the spotlight from William and Kate? Yeah, none of that happened. It was complete radio silence. Get this, the same couple who literally built their entire brand on getting attention, who couldn't go a week without some kind of media moment, suddenly got completely ignored. Their anniversary came and went like it was just another Tuesday. No trending hashtags, no magazine spreads, no entertainment shows doing special segments. Nothing. It's like the world collectively agreed to forget they existed. Now here's what makes it even more brutal. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't them choosing privacy. We all know how that usually goes with these two. This was the world making a choice to look away. The couple who once dominated headlines, who had journalists hanging on their every word, who could launch 1,000 think pieces with a single interview, had somehow become irrelevant. That has got to sting more than the hate. Hate implies passion, indifference. That's the end of a career. Picture this, just another sunny morning TV show. Bright lights, chatty hosts, glossy smiles. But when the subject of the Sussexes came up, the air left the room. These are two people who left the royal family specifically to control their own narrative. They wanted the spotlight on their terms. And for a while, it worked. They had Netflix throwing money at them, Spotify giving them deals. Everyone wanted a piece of the Sussex brand. Fast forward to now, their anniversary doesn't even register as a blip on anyone's radar. The really interesting part is what this moment revealed regarding their standing in the industry. When you strip away the PR machine, the carefully crafted statements, the strategic media partnerships, what is left? Apparently, not much. No genuine support from the industry they desperately wanted to be part of. No warm wishes from the family they claimed was so terrible. Just empty space where a celebration should have been. But that deafening silence wasn't peaceful. It was savage. It was the universe's way of saying, we're done listening. And for two people whose entire existence seems to revolve around being seen, being heard, being relevant, that might be the cruelest punishment of all. But while the world was looking away, something else was brewing. Something far more suspicious than a missed anniversary post. While their anniversary was getting zero attention, the whispers about the children were turning into shouts. People who have been watching the royal family for decades, insiders who know how the machinery of the palace really works, started talking. And not just whispering behind closed doors anymore. They were saying out loud what millions had been thinking for years, but were too afraid to post. Look, royal births follow a pattern. There is a formula that has been in place for generations. It's not just tradition, it's verification. Mom goes to the hospital, the baby is born, There is documentation signed by royal physicians. Medical staff are present and named, and then boom, the new parents step outside with the baby. They show the kid to the world. It's transparency. It's how you show an entire nation that everything is above board. Kate Middleton did it 3 times. Was it fun for her? Absolutely not. She stood there hours after giving birth, tired hair, probably a mess underneath the blowout body aching, but she showed up. Clear, simple, no mystery. She presented the heir. But with Meghan, none of that happened. Where were those hospital steps moments? Where was that clear timeline everyone is used to seeing? Every royal watcher's blood ran cold when the details, or lack of them, started coming out. Instead of the usual polite royal commentary we are used to seeing on these programs, we got weird camera angles, photos that looked more staged than spontaneous, and a total blackout on the medical team involved. When you are part of a monarchy, when your kids could potentially be in line for the throne, transparency isn't optional. It is literally part of the deal. Every other royal mother understood that. They followed the protocol because it matters. It reassures the public. It maintains the trust between the crown and the people. But Meghan threw that whole playbook straight out the window, and Harry just went along with it like it was totally normal. So naturally, people started wondering, what is the deal? Why all the closed doors around something that is usually so straightforward? Why break traditions that exist for a good reason? And the more they dodged those basic expectations, the louder the whispers got. Social media started analyzing every pixel of the few photos released. Forums were analyzing timelines. People were comparing dates, and nothing was adding up. Then, mainstream media finally caught on. For years, this had been bubbling under the surface, YouTube channels talking about it, royal watchers raising eyebrows, random blogs connecting dots. But major outlets stayed quiet because it was too risky, too controversial, easier to just ignore it. But eventually, the story got too big to hide. The questions became too loud to pretend they didn't exist. What is wild is that these weren't random trolls making stuff up. These were people with actual experience, folks who had covered royal births before, who knew what normal looked like. And they were all saying the same thing: something doesn't add up here. The couple who built their entire brand on speaking their truth suddenly had questions they wouldn't address. The irony is almost funny. Harry and Meghan spent years doing interviews, podcasts, documentaries, telling everyone their version of events, their feelings, their struggles. They wanted the world to hear their story. But the one story people actually wanted clarity on, the one that actually mattered, for royal succession, total shutdown. No answers, no explanations, just more staged photos and carefully worded statements that said absolutely nothing. And that's when people really started paying attention. This is where the visual evidence gets truly bizarre. We aren't just talking about a lack of photos, we are talking about the photos we did get. We got weird camera angles photos that looked more staged than a Vogue shoot and a baby bump that seemed to change shape depending on the day of the week. I'm not making this up. Go back and look at the archive pictures yourself. One day it's there sitting high, the next day it's different, then it's back again, but lower. Then it defies gravity. People noticed. They started asking questions. And you know what? Asking questions about anatomy isn't some crazy conspiracy thing. It's basic observation. There were events where the bump seemed to shift positions in ways that, let's be honest, don't really make anatomical sense. One video specifically where she crouches down and pops back up with zero effort. Anyone who has been pregnant knows that center of gravity shift makes that movement nearly impossible. The inconsistencies were visible enough that even casual observers were noticing something felt off. And then there were all the things that were just missing. Where were the medical updates? Usually there is some official statement from the hospital. The royal gynecologist sign a document that is placed on an easel at Buckingham Palace. It's archaic, sure, but it's proof. With Meghan's pregnancies, barely anything. Just carefully worded statements that somehow said nothing while using a lot of words. It felt less like a royal tradition and more like a carefully managed Hollywood production. Every detail controlled every image, curated every piece of information, filtered through layers of PR strategy. Look, I get wanting some privacy. That is totally valid. But there is a difference between privacy and secrecy. Privacy is, we're not sharing every detail of our personal lives. Secrecy is, we are deliberately avoiding the normal expected protocols that everyone else follows to hide something. The contrast with Kate couldn't have been more obvious. Kate followed tradition because she understood why it existed. She got that being part of the royal family means accepting certain public responsibilities, including showing up for those big moments even when you are tired and probably just want to go home. Meghan seemed to view those traditions as optional suggestions she could pick and choose from based on what suited her narrative that day. And that is when people really started questioning what was actually going on. Because when you break every norm, avoid every standard practice, and make everything unnecessarily complicated, people are going to wonder why. What could possibly require all this smoke and mirrors? What about following basic royal protocol was so impossible unless there was something to hide? But if you think the photos were suspicious, wait until you hear how Harry reacted when people actually asked him about it. Now, you would think when people start asking legitimate questions, the response would be pretty simple, right? Just address it calmly. Maybe share some normal info, show a birth certificate, and move on. That is what a confident person would do. That is what someone with nothing to hide would do. Harry, he completely lost it. The man who literally said he left the royal family to escape media pressure started going after anyone who dared bring this up. And I'm not talking about a polite no comment or a dignified silence. I'm talking full-blown meltdown mode. Angry statements, heated reactions, the whole 9 yards. It was like watching someone who had been backed into a corner with nowhere to go. Think about that for a second. This is the same guy who preached about mental health, about being open and honest, about breaking down barriers. But the moment someone asks about the origins of his own kids, instant rage. And you know what that tells people? It tells them you are scared. When someone reacts that strongly to a simple question, nobody thinks, oh, he's just being protective. They think, what is he hiding? The whole thing just made him look worse, because look at what people saw. A man who claims he wants privacy but can't stop talking to the media. A man who says he values honesty, but explodes when asked honest questions. The contradiction was so obvious, it hurt. And every time he went off, every time he got defensive, he just poured more fuel on the fire he was trying to put out. And where was Meghan during all this nowhere? Totally MIA. You would think if they were such a united front, such a team, she would be right there backing him up, or at least saying something. But nope, she let Harry go out there and flail around like a fish out of water, looking increasingly unhinged while she stayed safely in the background. That isn't partnership. That is throwing someone under the bus. What really stood out was how desperate he looked. Not strong, not protective, not like a father defending his family. He looked panicked, rattled, like someone who knew the walls were closing in and couldn't figure out how to escape. You could almost see him scrambling, trying to control a narrative that was already way past his control. And the more he fought, the weaker he appeared. Every angry response, every heated reaction just confirmed what people were already thinking. A guy with nothing to hide doesn't act like this. A confident father doesn't go nuclear over basic questions. This was someone in full panic mode and everyone could see it. The really sad part, he did this to himself. Nobody forced him to react this way. He could have handled it with grace, with dignity, maybe even with a sense of humor. Instead, he chose anger and defensiveness. And in doing so, he basically admitted there was something worth being defensive about. That isn't protection. That is fear showing through. But the fear wasn't just about the birth. It was about the names they chose to hide behind. So, this is where it gets really interesting and honestly pretty disrespectful. People weren't asking for the world, they just wanted basic transparency. But when the Sussexes refused to give that, the focus landed on their daughter Lilibet. They named this kid after the Queen herself, the late Queen Elizabeth. But not just her formal name, they took her private family nickname. Lilibet was the name her father used, the name her husband, Prince Philip, used. It was intimate, it was personal. It was arguably the last thing that truly belonged to her and her alone. That is a massive statement to hijack that name. You don't just casually throw around a name like that. It carries weight. It carries meaning. It is supposed to be this beautiful tribute. But then people started asking, was this really about honoring the Queen, or was it about using her name for credibility? Think about it. If you genuinely wanted to honor someone, you would probably make sure that person was actually comfortable with it, right? There were reports, credible reports from palace insiders suggesting the queen wasn't even asked beforehand. She was told. That is not a tribute. That is appropriation. That is taking someone's legacy and slapping it on your kid for your own branding benefit. And the more they refused to discuss any of this, the worse it looked. Every dodge, every non-answer, every time they sidestepped a direct question about the naming process, it just made people more convinced something major was being kept under wraps. You can only avoid the topic so many times before people stop believing in coincidence and start thinking you are deliberately maneuvering. What made it even stranger was the pattern. This wasn't just one awkward moment they were trying to move past. This was consistent, repeated, deliberate avoidance. Question after question, outlet after outlet, person after person, same result. Silence. And not the dignified kind of silence, the uncomfortable, "we are hoping you will stop asking" kind of silence. People started comparing notes, looking at timelines, pulling up old photos and statements. And the more they dug, the less things made sense. Details that should have matched up didn't match up. Stories that should have been consistent kept changing. For a couple who spent years talking about their version of events and their narrative, they sure seemed allergic to answering questions when it came to this specific topic. The whispers that started as quiet speculation turned into full conversations. Comment sections lit up. Forums dedicated entire threads to analyzing every detail. People weren't being mean or malicious. They were genuinely confused. When you present yourself as open and authentic, but then clam up on the most basic questions about your own children and the names you gave them, that is going to raise eyebrows. A lot of them. And the silence didn't make it go away. If anything, it made it 10 times worse, because now it wasn't just about the original questions anymore. It was about the cover-up, and this cover-up might have legal consequences they never saw coming. So, where does that leave us? We are watching two people who demanded the world's attention, finally getting it, but not in the way they wanted. They wanted to be adored, respected, revered. Instead, they are being analyzed, questioned, and slowly dismantled by the very public they tried to manipulate. The silence on their anniversary wasn't just a snub. It was a forecast. A preview of a future where the drama stops working, where the victim card expires, and where the secrets they have fought so hard to keep finally come into the light. The cracks in the foundation are too big to ignore now. The story didn't add up, the photos didn't make sense, and the rage didn't match the questions. They built a castle on shifting sands, banking on the idea that nobody would dare question a duke and duchess. But they forgot one thing. The truth has a funny way of coming out no matter how much PR money you throw at it. And when it finally does, when the full story of what really happened behind those closed doors is exposed, the silence won't be coming from the public. It will be the stunned silence of Harry and Meghan, realizing they have nowhere left to run. What do you think? Is the silence regarding the children just privacy, or is it proof of something much bigger? Let me know in the comments below.